I have these cabinets down in my workshop, and they're nothing special. They were in my old house in the garage, but I've always wanted to put doors on them, so it's time to get around to doing that. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to make rails and stiles, and then I'll put a panel in between. And it's a really simple door. I've made them before, and I'll show you an example of it here in just a second. Some years ago, Jack, our cat, got into our pantry and started tearing into things. So it was either kill the cat or put the pantry behind closed doors. Well, Lisa's pretty attached to Jack, and so are the girls, so I built this pantry real quick, and you can see that it's just a simple panel inlaid between rails and stiles. I'm going to show you how I make that I'm going to be making, and this is just a little detail right here. This is where the panel will float, and the way you make this is with this. This is a router bit, 1/2 of the process for a cabinet door set. I'll run all of the pieces through this, and then I'll run some of the pieces through another bit, and that'll give me a profile that allows me to interlock the rails and stiles, and then the panel just floats in between. So let's get started. As with all of the processes, you have to be selective in your wood. This is just a simple project, so I'm going to use pine for this. It's a soft wood, but these are just cabinets down in my workshop, so I don't care if they get beat up too much. But one of the things I do worry about is when I machine the wood, the knots in it. So you can see, for example, that this piece has a knot right there, and it goes from one end to the other. So if I look on this side, that's a pretty prominent, but on this side, not so much. So this is the side that I'll machine. And I've done that with all of the pieces, trying to keep the knots free on the machine side. I don't care too much about the other side. That's just going to be on the outside of the door. So let's go ahead and get started. It's going to get loud, so when I edit this, I'll turn the volume down. Okay, so I'm about to get started, and I'll edit out the noise when I do the editing. The editing is also good for something else. I already cut one piece. Now you're not going to see this, but I went ahead and cut it, and as you can see, it's just a little too thin right there. So I had to change the depth of the router bit. I probably should have checked that before I started knocking it out. But that's what editing's great for. You'll never know about that mistake. But while I'm down here sweating, you can see the sweat in my workshop trying to better my home, two friends of mine, Chris and John Henry, are sending text messages back and forth, and they're talking about retired life. Now, John Henry's still working, but he might as well not be. His last trip, I think he said, was to Costa Rica, Miami, down on the beach. He's always sending me pictures. It's really a pain in the neck. And now Chris is getting in on it. Chris is up in Alaska with his family. To his credit, he spent most of the last 10 days in a tent instead of in a bed. But he's up there fishing and says that he caught 46 salmon between the group of them in the first day, and they're getting ready to fillet them. So he's retired. He's definitely retired. Working really hard at being retired too, and they're sending text messages back and forth, and here I am just working away. So let me get back to it. And that's it. That's a little bit better. I don't know if you can quite see the detail right there. Nice little profile, and then the panel will fit right in that groove. And I have to do 5 more of these, and then I have to cut them to length, and I have to do another bit of machining, and I'll show you that when I'm done. It goes very similar to this with one important exception, but I'm going to go ahead and turn that off and get to work on this. I'm also going to check to see how John Henry and Chris's text messages are going. I don't begrudge their wives, Kathy and Wendy, the opportunity to enjoy themselves. They worked really hard. They worked a lot harder than we ever did. But these two, they just rubbing it in, So I've spent some time machining everything. I got all of the cuts done that I showed you just a moment ago. And then I had to cut everything to length, and I needed to cut the width, the rails. So here's the rail. The style looks exactly the same, except it's 30 inches long. And now what I need to do is I need to machine this end. And that's what I'm going to do now. And I talked about there being an issue when you do this. This is what it will look like when I'm done. If I turn it a little bit, you can see. And it will fit in just like this. Now, of course, this is will fit in just like this. And you can see that joint right there. It's a really good glue joint. A lot of surface area in there to glue up. But the problem is that when you run this through, there's a chance of tear out. The blade wants to, or the bit wants to kick this out at the end. And what you normally do is you just take another piece of wood, run it through at the same time, so that any tear out happens on the piece of scrap. And that's what I'm going to do now. And that's it. I've cut that profile in the rail, and as you can see, I use this as a sacrificial piece. As I pushed it through, it looked like this, and the bit spun and hogged out this material here, and then since this was here, it couldn't tear out. It just continued to hog out material, and once this cleared the bit, I just pulled it out and we were done. So that prevents tear out, and tear out can just ruin the piece, because on the other side the profile will be even more delicate because this will be the trailing, and if this tears out, it just ruins the whole piece. So you just have to be careful. I'm going to go ahead and get busy. Going to turn this off. The rest of the cuts are exactly the same, and then we'll be up to cutting the plywood for the insert and then final assembly. So we're closing in on it. I've got all of the rails and stiles. Having a hard time with that today. All the rails and stiles machined and cut to length. It's not the final length. Once I put the drawers together, square it up, glue it up, let it dry, then I'll cut it to its final length and width. And the next thing to do is cut the panels, and I just need to have some 1/4 inch plywood laying around. I've cut it to length, now it's to cut it, rip it to width, and then will be a time to assemble. That's it. That's the door panel. 4 of them already cut. This is, like I said, scrap wood, so they're not going to match exactly, but that's okay. It's just for my workshop. We'll do the assembly next. So it's really very simple. Wherever the rails and stiles come together, I'm going to put glue. And the panel's going to slide into the groove. And that's it. That's all we need for this door to work. There's, like I said, a tremendous amount of glue surface when you machine those rails and stiles. And that's what we're going to see today. It's been a while since I've actually done any of this. We just spread that glue around. Cover everything on both the rail and the stile. And then fit it together. I'm going to come get the camera, bring it in close so you can see what I'm doing here. So I've glued all that, as well as that. Just going to slide that together. See if I can do this without covering the camera lens. There you go. A little bit of squeeze out. That's fine, we'll clean that up. Same thing over here. Just going to squeeze that together. It's actually catching the cloth. There we go. Next, what we're going to do is slide a panel in. Move you out of the way. Slide that panel all the way in. Go. Here comes Lisa. Come on in.
Going to get stuff to cook for dinner.
Okay, smile, you're on camera.
Hi. Are you filming right now?
Yep. Filming the glue up.
Sorry.
That's all right. This way Lois knows who I'm talking to when I do this. Lois is Lisa's best friend. She mentioned to me, she wondered who I was talking to when I made these videos. Was I just downstairs talking to myself? And I've known Lois as long as I've known Lisa. So she gets to call me Batty if she wants to. Okay. So we slide this together. persuasion. There. And that's it, all glued up. It's really pretty simple. That took me, what, 4 minutes, 5 minutes? And that was just the first round. So now what I'm going to do is get a couple of clamps, clamp this up until it dries, and then I'll trim it to length and width, and that's it.